New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're at episode 514. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Now, today we get a chance to sit down with Vodafone's James Moore to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things, 5G, and where it's all going. So, welcome to the show, James. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for trekking up to Auckland. Great to have a chance to sit down. Now, you're based in Wellington. Tell us a little bit about your background. How have you ended up in this world of mobiles and whatnot? Sounds like you've been involved in the sort of technical sphere of things, engineering in New Zealand for a fair time.
Yeah, I count myself as one of the really lucky people that gets to really enjoy my job. It's a part of the business which is still growing, is exciting and ever changing. So it's pretty cool. I started off as an electronics technician, with soldering iron in hands, putting stuff together for some local companies. About 16 years ago, I joined Vodafone. Back then, sort of BlackBerry was the fantastic new thing on the block. Done numerous jobs throughout the time, plus some time working for Vodafone Group in the UK. But coming back here to work initially across Asia Pacific and now just focused on New Zealand, doing the Internet of Things.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. And you tell us about the work that you did in the UK for Vodafone Group, because you obviously got some really global exposure and your hands in some interesting pies over there. Yeah,
look, we're a massive company. We may be a little bit separated here in New Zealand now, but we're still part of the big family. And Vodafone really has led the way in all sorts of areas. When I was across in the UK, I was mainly focused on the handset security products like AirWatch, Mobile Iron, etc. But just sniffing around the edges of the IoT world, which really fascinated me. And when I realised my children were starting to get British accents, I thought it was time to shift back to New Zealand.
Cool.
And took on the service architect role for Asia Pacific.
Excellent. Well, before we sort of jump into the discussion topics, a big thank you to New Zealand Tech Podcast's show partners. That of course includes Vodafone New Zealand, also Sumo Logic, Spark, Vocus, HP, Samsung, Gorilla Technology, and Umbrella Connect. So we really appreciate the support of those partners that make the show possible, and also that they accept the way we operate, which means I get to ask the tough questions where and when appropriate. So no editorial control. I don't think we'll put you on the spot too much today, but you never know what comes up, so be prepared for anything. But let's jump in. I'm kind of interested. Whenever this title of IoT or the Internet of Things comes up, it's something that I think everybody has maybe a slightly different view on it. How would you describe this thing, the Internet of many things?
Yeah, look, and it is a fascinating area, and it's, you could say, is a buzzword of our current time, but it's something that we at Vodafone have been doing for a long time. Back when I first joined Vodafone, we called it telemetry, and that was getting small amounts of data from usually pretty business critical devices, and we still do that. We still do that today. But the Internet of Things, I guess it ranges all the way from those really core mission critical solutions, all the way to your home webcam or your Ring doorbell or whatever else. So look, it's a massive area, but to me it's defined by anything that's not talking directly to a person at the time. So connecting something outside of your personal sphere back to the internet so that you can collect information usually and then do something with it.
Yeah. Now, we're going through this big transition at the moment. 5G's coming through, and these things take some time. Of course, Apple have just started launching their first 5G handset. We've had Samsung, Huawei, Oppo, and others with handsets, but that's in many ways sort of a small part of the picture as far as 5G is concerned. But before we we'll talk about that probably a little bit further in. But before we delve into that, when you think of the Internet of Things, I'm curious where it fits into this picture of using technology to make our lives better. I'm always very interested in, how do we leverage this incredible power of technology to improve ourselves and our country and our world as a whole. And I often refer back to when I left school, we had what was very exciting in terms of communications technology and in terms of computing generally. But now we've seen something like 1,000 times increase in computing power. By my estimates, probably about 1 million times increase in internet connectivity speed. So, I'm very keen to understand how we can leverage those things. What do you see in terms of the Internet of Things actually helping? How can it really help society?
I think it opens up opportunities. And whether that's ensuring that our elderly are well cared for in their homes, so that they can stay in their preferred residence for longer. Monitoring to make sure that they're still opening the fridge at a certain time of the day. Whether it's tracking the quality of our streams, our rivers, making sure that things are being put in the right recycling bins, for example. Reducing the number of times that you've got to jump into your petrol guzzling car and drive down the road, when that information can just be collected through our IoT networks and sent back to a central hub. These are all opportunities, and a lot of them are being done already. A lot of them are just starting to be done. But with 5G and the ability that we've got to start not only collecting information from the field, but then actually doing real-time control of information and the things in the field. A really neat use case, and it's a bit of a demo that our friends in Vodafone Germany have done, is they've got a crane operator sitting on one side of Germany, controlling a crane on the other side of Germany. So that means that instead of that crane operator having to drive out to site, climb up that dangerous tower and sit in that cab, he can basically do it from a nice air-conditioned warm office with very low latency and fulfill his job. So look, there's massive opportunities still. Our friends at Gartner are predicting some incredible rise in the number of connected devices, and so there's going to be devices which just connect to your home Wi-Fi or to your existing connectivity. But then there's also going to be devices which you really need a high level of security, management, control, where customers' businesses, customers' lives could depend on that. So that's the interesting areas that things like 5G are starting to enable.
Yeah, and I guess this is what we're used to with technology, in that often we will look at technology advances and it looks as though they're moving quite slowly. But if you I guess close your eyes and look away for a little while, or you get busy with other things, which is realistically what happens in business, right? Everyone's busy with so many things, and then often you miss those opportunities, and it is gradual in some ways. The adoption of technology gets easier and cheaper over time. I mean, mobile communications are really scaling to be able to handle so many more devices, presumably at a much lower cost per device over time. So I think it is important for businesses to really be keeping their eye on the ball. I came across one the other day, actually, in terms of just a very simple use of communications that I hadn't seen before, and it created the drive-through pizza shop.
Right.
Have you come across drive-through pizza place before?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's not quite as a traditional drive-through, but you can fire up your app and order your pizza, and then they'll track where you are, and when you get there, they'll bring your pizza straight out to your car. Very, very small thing, but then it's just a difference from what was done, a little while before. And if we look at the way so many industries and businesses are transitioning, often it is these little gradual things, but when you stack it up over time, it's actually can make a big difference.
Well, everyone's looking for that little bit of difference that they can make to their customers, and whether it's meaning that they don't have to sit in their car for 10 minutes while that pizza gets cooked, or whether it's just actually making it easier to order or whatever else. Everyone's looking for that differentiation, and the market's crowded. Every market. I don't think you talk to anybody who says that like another competitor in their market. But if they can create something which is a bit different, and maybe a bit interesting, and get some people like you and I talking about it, then all the better.
Yeah. That was Dominos, by the way. So give them the credit. I have no idea what other pizza companies are doing, but good to see that ongoing innovation and use of technology. Now, one thing that I heard about recently is this new or refreshed platform from Vodafone in terms of actually managing all these devices. And you mentioned to me before we started that Vodafone globally have something like 100 million IoT devices under management. That's a reasonably big number.
It's massive.
So how does that work, and what's this new platform? What does it make different for those who are thinking about or already using mobile connectivity to varying devices?
Yeah, and I liken it to sort of taking the finest Belgium chocolate and then adding a kiwi fruit flavour to it. So basically, we've had the Global Data Services platform. That's the platform you talk about with 100 million connections. It may even be more by now on it. And that's a platform that Vodafone Group has built from the ground up for IoT purposes. It is built for scale. It is built with the ability to have automation, to reports, API controlled, etc. One of both our, the good things of being in New Zealand, we're so far away, and that's been great for us with COVID, but it does mean from a data latency perspective, it's a long way for data to travel all the way up to Europe and back. What we've done with our Connect by Zone platform is basically enabled our local IMSI range, our local number range, to be loaded onto that global platform. So we've got all the control, the management, all the goodies of that platform available, but kept the data within New Zealand. So the customer's data plane remains in New Zealand, and mainly for data, but also for voice and SMS, etc. So we've got that ability to, I guess, bridge the best of both worlds. And for customers that are only ever going to operate in New Zealand, that means that their data latency has dropped right down. And for one of my customers, that meant a drop for software updates from around about 45 minutes down to 4 minutes. So that's the impact that latency was having on their particular application.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to understand that there are often really big technical differences between one vendor, one product, and another, and it's it's something that I know my team at Gorilla Technology often come across, and you get the scenario where a business leader's made a decision on a piece of technology without necessarily actually drilling into any of the things behind the scenes. Oh, yep, they convinced me, so we've signed up, we've bought this platform, and then you find these surprises sort of behind the scenes later. And actually, I was looking at was it one of the popular makers of Bluetooth devices and headsets, and trying out one of their products recently was Jabra, and that needed a firmware update, and for whatever reason their platform was very, very slow, probably Europe based, latency and varying other things, and it was just taking an inordinate amount of time to actually pull down a software update or firmware and so on. And if you've got, say, 1,000 Jabra headsets, that's probably going to cause you a bit of pain.
That's right.
That said, last time I looked at that, it did seem to be operating a fair bit faster. So maybe they've got on top of that one. But I guess that's probably one. I mean, I guess hopefully now it's sort of a historical thing, but it's one of those things where Vodafone tied in to a global entity. You get some benefit of what you can draw from that global entity, but then other local players will have had to come up with their own local solutions from the get-go. So sometimes you might be ahead on one metric or one area, but maybe behind on others. So I think that's something you're paying some attention to.
100%, and we've been really fortunate with the global brand, the global recognition, but also having access to that wealth of product from Group. Since we're now a private company here in New Zealand, it's I guess released us to decide what we want to take. We're not getting dictated on what we have to take anymore.
Yes.
So I think it's the best of both worlds. We still get to have those really close interactions with our friends up in Europe, but we can make our own decisions. What's right for New Zealand and New Zealand's population.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. Now, talking about 5G, where does that sort of fit into this world of IoT? And in fact, what is what are the differences between networks? We hear about IoT networks, and then our traditional sort of 4G networks, 5G. How do these things what are the differences, and how do they cross over in a 5G world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in historically, to do telemetry or machine to machine in a GSM world, we've sort of leveraged what were basically technologies designed for our mobile phones.
Yeah.
What they've realised over time is that while that's fine, as we get more and more devices, crowding onto a single location, we needed technologies which are going to better suit IoT. So the clever boffins up at GSMA and so forth, and with input from a number of providers, including our other competitors here in New Zealand, which is great. And we've created some GSMA-based specifications.
That's the GSM Association?
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's been so many years. I usually like to explain what's GSM. We kind of all know it, but it's the global sort of standard that really brought SIM cards.
Correct.
And because we didn't have SIM cards before that, and pretty much that's been the standard really in New Zealand for a number of years, hasn't it? From a mobile perspective,
it has. And with Vodafone, we've been very fortunate that we backed GSM from the start. We even in our Bell South days, we had.
I remember that.
GSM.
As an early Bell South customer.
Yep. So we've been down that track.
The SIM cards have got a bit smaller.
They have.
I think the original SIM card I had was basically a full-size credit card.
That's right.
And now, of course, they've kind of gone the way where you can back to an eSIM or a virtual SIM, which is somewhat, in some ways, similar to what you had before SIM cards existed, although somewhat more flexible.
Similar but different. There's some slightly different security things around it, but I won't go into that now. The networks that I started to talk about, these are narrowband IoT and LTE cadmium. And forgive me for diving into the opening the bonnet and diving into the tech a little bit. It's what spins my wheel. But narrowband particularly, and that's for devices which are going to send tiny amounts of data.
Right. So you don't need to the same level of performance as
Correct.
Streaming YouTube or something, right?
Absolutely. So we sacrifice bandwidth, and in return we get cheaper devices and low power, which means battery power devices all of a sudden become viable.
Which is
many years.
interesting, isn't it? Because we've got used to certainly mobile phones that need such regular charging.
That's right.
But actually in the IoT world, you can have devices that will communicate on an ongoing basis for months on end without batteries being changed. What's the sort of reality you see there?
So if you're to believe the marketers, we're talking
no, never.
You're talking 10 years plus on a set of high quality batteries. It comes down to the number of times it's checking in and what it's doing. If it's just sort of giving you a soil moisture reading once a day, then potentially you could get up to 10 years, and if the device has been designed correctly. So that's with narrowband, and the good thing with narrowband is while it's a technology which is out there today, it has been adopted into the 5G standard. So we're starting to see some of that long-term consistency coming through.
Right, because you talk about a device that can last for 10 years. The question becomes, can it actually communicate for 10 years? Is that technology going to be supported? And I imagine we're in this position now where there are lots of sort of smart meters and other devices now scattered around New Zealand that communicated using one mechanism, probably 2G GSM networks in some cases when they're launched. And that's technology that doesn't stick around forever, and I guess that part of the spectrum has to be freed up for other purposes now.
Well, customers like you and I want the latest and greatest. We want 5G, we want bigger speeds, we want absolute lower latency. So we have got a limited spectrum. So we've got to think about how we can shift things around to suit.
How long has 2G got left?
We've made a commitment to keep it going till 2025.
Right.
So I think we're well out there and on our own there, and so that's been really good for our customers that they can plan for that. And
you're making it easier for people to drag their feet, though, aren't you?
Possibly, but it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But we expect that the majority of devices left on 2G will actually be our telemetry devices. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of those narrowband IoT and cadmium, so does that mean that technology will be just built into the 5G spec, so things that have been designed to work, with those communication mechanisms will actually keep working without
that's
too much drama?
That's our expectations. The other one I didn't mention was LTE cadmium, so you're quite right. And that's I guess a down-spec'd version of the full LTE that we use or 4G that we use networks on our phones.
Yep.
But the GSMA have pulled them into the 5G spec. So we need to make sure that the devices which are put out today will still work in 10 years' time or whatever else to that spec. But we've got to work closely with our customers to make sure that they design it in the right way so that it can work out there.
Now you mentioned security and reliability earlier. I'm always very interested in security things because I just see so many scenarios through the work I do in terms of auditing organisations and just getting visibility on varying organisations, technologies and networks, and constantly sort of shocked. I suppose it doesn't seem to stop. There's always something to surprise in terms of the lack of attention often to cybersecurity here in New Zealand, and of course it's not just New Zealand. What are the sort of key considerations from those perspectives?
Yeah, so the first thing, and you mentioned already, is the SIM card. Having that unique key string in the security card, in the SIM card, and that flows through into the eSIM world. But having that security so that you know who you're talking to, and that's been something that's steered us in good steps, all the way through. But then looking at it overall, do you just allow your device to talk to the open internet, or do you set up your own private walled garden ecosystem? And that's certainly the way we've gone down with the Global Data Services platform, is focused on a closed wall environment, and that's from a voice, from a data, from an SMS perspective. Where necessary, we can poke holes in that if we have to, but we do that, with customers' knowledge, and working with the customers to make sure that they understand the options, potential risks, and whatever else. But yeah, you're right. It's something that all IoT vendors, players, marketers, whatever else need to consider. If you think about some of the DDoS attacks, imagine if IoT devices all of a sudden became hosts for a DDoS attack. So it is pretty critical to make sure that we do it in a controlled, managed way.
Yeah. Now, before we finish up, I'm always interested in what's coming next. What does the future look like? And there are so many discussions that can be had down this track, but more and more the interesting pieces of technology in the future, will be connected. And 5G is obviously part of that story, because it allows so many more devices to be able to be connected. Gives an increased level of performance. All of those sort of IoT advantages, lower power draw and lower latency and so on. What do you see as some of the interesting things that that we can expect, or things that people may not even be aware of that are happening now?
The two main things I see coming through with 5G. The first is the ability to move from an IoT world where we've just typically been pulling information from the field and then making business decisions based on that information. And moving from that world where we're just collecting information to actually now doing real-time control of things out in the field. So first thing is that control. The second area which personally interests me, and I think I've heard you talking about on your previous podcast, is the V2X, vehicle to anything type communications. And this is where vehicles equipped with 5G can start communicating with infrastructure, with other vehicles, possibly even pedestrians, to make sure that those deadly weapons can be managed and controlled in a great way, in a controlled way.
Yeah, and certainly, that's an area of interest for me, and I'm we haven't had a chance to talk about it on the podcast yet, but in the last few days, Tesla have started pushing out these sort of beta of their next autonomous sort of driving technologies, and you think about how much data that gets collected by these vehicles, and it's been talked about that if they could actually suck a lot more of that data back, then that's going to have a flow on in terms of safety and improving the development of that technology. So that'll be interesting to see how it progresses. And I think there probably are just so many things that haven't been uncovered yet in terms of how do we use the technology. My wife and I were talking about we don't have gas running to our house, but we have a property that has gas bottles. And someone was staying the other day, and they were like, we're out of hot water, and this thing's supposed to flick over and so on. But every now and then it's there's forgetfulness, and we didn't order the gas bottles. And I mean, it just seems natural. These sorts of things in a modern world, you'd expect that to be all, connected up. You should be able to, see through your app. You log into the gas company's website. They should know, how much gas you've actually got, what you've used. They should turn up and replace the bottles without, you having to actually think about it. And there must be, so many more things that are just going to become a natural, part of our world. But of course, those organisations that figure these things out first and manage to get there first, end up winning a bigger slice of the market than those that are maybe laggards and are a year or two behind or what have you, right?
I've got good news for you. There are people in the market doing exactly that today, so I can give you some contact details afterwards.
Excellent. Sounds very good. I'm in. Excellent. Well, great to chat, James. Great to have you here on the New Zealand Tech Podcast, and we'll look forward to following progress and just seeing where things go. It is that interesting sort of dilemma that the technology sort of appears to move slowly, but you take your eye off it for not too long, and suddenly you've been left behind. So great to get a bit of an update. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a privilege.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on New Zealand Tech Podcast today, and we will catch you again with another episode next week. All right. See ya.
New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.